I love to watch basketball, not just for pure entertainment, but also the technical aspects of the game. But when I watch people like Charles Barkley and other NBA retired players, I am often surprised that they actually have no idea what's going on in an NBA game. Why do most retired players know nothing about basketball? Now, I know that's a pretty controversial take, but I will be detailing the reasons why, when you watch players like Charles Barkley on Inside the NBA, they don't actually know anything about the modern game. Here's a quick summary of the reasons why. Number one, the modern era emphasizes more skill and less physical basketball. Number two, defensive strategy has changed significantly due to decrease of one-on-one oriented defense towards more team-oriented help and recover defense. Number three, offensive strategy has changed significantly due to the increased use of the three-point shot, as well as having better spacing. Number four, post-ups have been found to be the most inefficient shot in basketball. Number five, rule changes result in the game being completely different every 5 to 10 years. Number six, most retired players think about basketball in the perspective of their era. They always think their style is the best instead of changing their school of thought. Anyhow, I often watch ESPN for fun. It's purely for entertainment in basketball terms, as most of them have no idea what's going on in a basketball game. The reason why Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless are being paid so much are because they are personalities. They don't know much in terms of the technical details. One example is when Mark Cuban goes to ESPN and actually starts talking about basketball strategy instead of needless comments such as choking under pressure, weak superstar, LeBron doesn't have the clutch gene. And he made a lot of sense, whereas the personalities really didn't know how to respond to Mark Cuban.
We want to start by just finding out what's your, you may have more than one issue, but what's your biggest issue with Skip?
It's not just Skip, it's sports writers, sports media in general, where everything's generalities, right? Excruciating pressure. What the hell is that, right?
So when you're watching ESPN, watch it for the entertainment. Don't expect to actually learn anything. Now, about retired NBA players. Some of them have been hired to become analysts on sports shows. The most famous show would probably be Inside the NBA, and the best personality would probably be Charles Barkley.
Let me tell you how bad it was. So I was like, wait a minute. That was the 90s. Remember we used to start the season out in New York? Yeah. I left 2 tickets at the hotel for one of my family members, and when I got back to the hotel, it was 4 tickets there. That's how bad the Knicks been lately.
I love Charles, but taking advice from him about actual basketball? No thanks. Now, I know this is a controversial take, but this is my argument. The majority of retired NBA players don't know anything about modern basketball. And the question is, why? Well, there are a couple of factors to consider. Number one, modern era emphasizes more skill and less physical basketball. If you look at the old basketball archives, everybody's fighting. During the 1980s, basketball had a really tough image where everyone was perceived to be punks and fighting with one another all the time. David Stern recognized this problem and instituted a dress code for all players to remove that rough guy image. Then the Malice in the Palace happened, where fans became endangered due to the fights. This really affected the NBA's bottom line. So the league instituted various rules, such as no bench player could come out during brawls, and all the ticky-tack technical fouls and flagrant fouls, yeah, that was because there used to be fights. They are essentially policing and trying to prevent situations from escalating. Retired players think players are being soft, but the rules actually prevent you from being tough, or you'll get a huge suspension.
But I come from an era where big men didn't mind getting dunked on. It's a part of the game. You're playing against the best players in the world. You're going to get dunked on. But nobody's challenging them. Nobody's bumping them. Nobody's trying to get him out of his game. Like, all that's a lost art of the game. And I'm not saying be dirty, but it's a part of a part of physicality of the game that's not in the game no more. And if it's not, LeBron's going to average triple-doubles for the next 4 or 5 years.
Number two, Defensive strategy has changed significantly due to decrease of one-on-one defense towards more team-oriented help and recover defense. I hate when analysts are like, LeBron, go guard the best player. Why does James Harden not take tough defensive assignments? Steph is not as great because he can't defend one-on-one. In the Michael Jordan era, in eras predating 2000s basketball, you had to play one-on-one defense. The rules didn't allow you to play zone defense because it dictated that you had to at least guard one person. The only thing you could do if you weren't guarding one-on-one was to do a hard double team. The reason Michael Jordan was so valuable was because he could play one-on-one and could get hard double teamed, in which case he would just pass out to his open shooters. Today's defense is completely different and a million times more complicated than before. The Raptors, for example, play an absolutely amazing help and recover defense that is extremely complex. An example is shown here, where Van Vliet is the help, and Terrence Davis must protect the weak side by guarding two players. There's way less one-on-one defense than ever before, because you have to protect the three-point line. A great example of this is how teams currently guard Harden. If you play him straight up, he'll just go to a step back every single time and score at a high rate. Milwaukee Bucks actually, in fact, started guarding him by literally having the first player guard his step back, solely by slating on his hip. That's because he wants Harden to drive, as Milwaukee has good paint protection. This is not one-on-one defense. This is team defense. Players are just too skilled in this era. I don't care if you're Kawhi Leonard or Scottie Pippen or LeBron James playing defense. An elite offensive player in this era will cook any one-on-one matchup. So why doesn't LeBron or guys like Draymond guard the best player? It's because they play one of the most important roles on defense. They act as essentially a safety. They try to determine when to help protect the paint and when to help close out on passing lanes.
Butler with 4 seconds left. Butler denied by James.
Just keep an eye on it. I look to the top of the screen. Now here he comes, and he timed it perfectly. No foul involved.
Because they are so smart on the defensive end of the floor to make these reads. I'm not saying that one-on-one defense isn't important, but really, it is under the umbrella of team defense, more so than ever before. Number 3, offensive strategy has changed significantly due to the increased use of the three-point shot, as well as better spacing. Jump shooters are now more important than ever. I hate how every time Charles Barkley says, jump shooting teams can't win. That's such an oversimplification of what's actually going on. First and foremost, jump shooting role players are absolutely crucial. If you can't shoot, even as a center, you can't play in an important game because you mess up the floor spacing when your superstars are trying to drive. That's why the Rockets got rid of Clint Capella, because Westbrook already can't shoot and is a driver of the basketball, and Clint was just getting in the way of those drives. As a result, shooting is one of the most necessary components for any player in today's league. If you can't shoot, you can't provide spacing, which is a huge problem. A counter-argument may be the notion that Draymond Green also can't shoot, yet he's an all-star. First of all, you would be correct, because Draymond actually has ways of making it work with the Warriors. If you try to sag off him, he'll set a pick for Klay or Steph, and then Klay and Steph are wide open because his defender is in the paint and can't recover. The Raptors' answer to this was actually to use the box and one. Nobody was guarding anyone except Curry or Klay, so that was a huge problem in the finals for the Golden State Warriors. While Draymond is currently still a great passer and defender, I can foresee that if he still isn't able to shoot threes at a respectable clip in the following years, you will see him struggle in the playoffs when teams sag off him and deal with his pick and rolls better. He'll have to figure it out soon, or he might get traded by the Warriors to make cap space room. Number 4, the post-up hook shot and short jumpers are the most inefficient shot in basketball. Every retired player thinks that a post-up shot is an amazing shot. It isn't. It is literally the worst shot in basketball. And the reasons are, number one, it isn't a layup or a dunk, which has a high probability of going in. Number two, yes, it has better percentages than a mid-range shot or a three. However, threes and mid-range shots often bounce off the rim farther, meaning you are more likely to get an offensive rebound. Post-up shots hit the rim softly due to their close distance to the basket, making it really easy for the defense to get the rebound. Post-up shots are ridiculously inefficient. Even Rick Carlisle has mentioned that in a post-game interview. Yet these analysts still talk about it all the time as if centers have to post up. They don't. However, they do have its uses in specific situations. During the NBA Finals, it's important to have a great ISO MVP caliber player for mid-range or post-ups because they are so good at that shot against great defense that it can be used as a bailout whenever an offense is being stagnated by a terrific playoff defense. This can happen due to aggressive play during the playoffs, which is why Kevin Durant is such a cheat code for the Golden State Warriors due to his incredible ISO scoring. In addition, this may seem counterintuitive, but smaller players who are guards should post up more because referees call fouls much more for smaller players. If you hit a guy like LeBron James, because he's so strong, the refs don't even call a foul. If you hit a small guy like Steph Curry, actually that's probably a bad example since he never gets any calls, but you know what I'm saying, a small guy, and he flies to the moon, the refs have to call it. Second, post-ups are great as a passing situation. One quick pass to the lane and your teammate has a layup. You also have great angles to make passes for three-pointers. In fact, the Warriors' revolutionary offensive set is the post split, which has incredible variety and uses. I actually wish the Raptors would implement this more in their offense, but it does take a very special post player to be able to make those passes on target. The last point I want to make is that rule changes result in the game being completely different every 5 to 10 years. The rules of basketball are changing all the time, whether it is allowing zone defense, rules on preventing hand checking, offensive fouls, technical fouls from a defensive point of view. All of this is changing. There have also been huge rule changes on offense, such as allowing freedom of movement, having a three-point line, and having more lenient rules for fouls against pick and rolls. Every 5 to 10 years, everything changes so much that it's like playing a completely different game. Today's players have much more emphasis on length, being able to switch, shooting, spacing, instead of physicality in the previous eras. This connects to my last point. Retired players either don't watch basketball after retirement or they think their era was the best era. They're constantly complaining about how that in today's era, players are too soft. They whine, they aren't physical, and they don't play hard-nosed defense. First of all, to be fair to them, I think this is the case for a lot of older people. They reminisce about how great the old days were and hate on how bad today's society and kids are. I can certainly see a scenario where I am very nostalgic and wouldn't be able to adapt to changes in society. I'm not blaming them. That's just the way it is. Older people can get nostalgic. Post play is great, but it's actually not. Shaq talks about big men every single day on how they're not posting up. Other retired players talk about how bad the defense is today. How MJ would score 50 in today's era. I disagree. Yes, MJ would adapt, but I say it's much more difficult to play today. First of all, the players in the past were smoking and drinking every day. Do you see Jordan having a cigar every day in his documentary? The athletes didn't recover properly. They didn't take care of their bodies like athletes today do. They might lift weights a lot, but they don't have the skill and endurance of today's players. Now, you may argue that all of this is because of rule changes. And I agree that rule changes result in it being more difficult to compare eras. But I would still say that today's players are much better in terms of skill, fitness, and intelligence. In addition, the players of the future will be a lot better. Can you imagine a society where things aren't getting better in a particular profession? I find it hard to believe that. So I hope today people stop giving a hard time on the modern player. They are absolutely incredible in terms of fitness, basketball intelligence, and peak ability. Appreciate them before they retire.